This is Uncommonly Remarkable, where we discuss the surprising everyday lives and notable accomplishments of community leaders, entrepreneurs, and everyday folks like you and me. My name is Artis Beatty. I am a doctor of optometry and the chief medical officer for the My Eye Doctor OD. Though we will inevitably touch on topics within my area of expertise, the opinions and the conversations held here are separate from my work with My Eye Doctor.
Welcome to 2025. What an exciting venture for us, as this is the first time we're introducing video for Uncommonly Remarkable. It's been a great journey over the course of the last year and a half, and thank you so much for all the feedback and for all of the likes and follows. Today's guest is pretty amazing and a really exciting way to start the year. Amy Vale is the founder of For the Cubs, a company providing quality essentials for young children while supporting kids in foster care. Motivated by her experience as a foster parent, Amy transitioned from a successful marketing career with brands like Spotify and Charity Water to entrepreneurship to launch For the Cubs. After undergoing foster care training, Amy knew she found a gap in the market. For the Cubs' hero product, Percy, a weighted plush bear named after her late grandfather, embodies Amy's mission to provide comfort and belonging to every child. Ladies, gentlemen, all you remarkable people, please welcome Amy to the show. Well, hello, Amy. Welcome to the show. I am really excited to have you, so thank you again for taking time out to have a conversation with us today.
Of course, it's a pleasure to be here. I'm excited to chat more.
You know, it has been a journey for me starting this podcasting, being able to have conversations with some pretty remarkable people. But after reading more about your story and learning about your passion, I just can't believe some of the things that you've been involved in and your journey to where you are today. So would you mind talking to us a little bit about For the Cubs? We're going to go backwards in a bit, but let's start by just talking about For the Cubs and what the organization is all about.
Absolutely. So For the Cubs was launched in 2022. It's a brand for little kids for eating, sleeping, and soothing. The hero product, which is Percy, the weighted hug bear, was designed to mimic a hug after I learned in foster care training that everyone needs 8 to 12 hugs a day for emotional well-being. So I figured, hey, let's get the hugs out there. And Percy, the character, is actually in honor of my grandfather. And so it's really lovely to be able to send his memory out into the world because he meant a lot to me as a child. And so being able to know that his spirit is really sort of helping folks feel more comfort and calm as well when they get that 8 to 12 hugs a day from Percy is really powerful. And the other piece is that every order that you place with For the Cubs supports a kiddo in foster care via our nonprofit partner, One Simple Wish.
That is amazing. That is amazing. And I read a little bit about Percy, and I thought, wow, this is really cool because, and you have to fill in the blanks for me, but my understanding is that as a weighted bear, Percy has evenly distributed weight rather than having a center weight, which makes the bear a lot different than a lot of the weighted products that are out there. Is that right?
That's right. His weight is distributed through all 4 of his paws and in his body. So when you're holding him, he does feel like he's giving you a hug back. Other products oftentimes have their weight centralized in the body, and that is certainly helpful. But oftentimes it's really hard to replicate a hug. And so a lot of people that have kindly shared their experience with Percy have said that it really feels like I'm getting a hug, and that's the goal. So I'm stoked that we've been able to achieve that.
So tell me about how this all came about, though. So it feels like Percy as a personification maybe of your grandfather, and but the passion is really around the children in foster care. So can you tell me a little bit about what drew you to the foster children?
Yeah, so I grew up in the outback of Australia and on a vineyard. So we had lots of international backpackers coming through my parents' property, and it was a pretty awesome experience as a child to get to meet all of these people from all over the world. And there was one particular person that we continued to remain friends with, and he went on to travel to Africa. He was a marine biologist, and he spent a lot of time there and ended up adopting a child from Africa and took them back to the UK, where he was originally from. And that sort of journey of observing his choices and the way he chose to live his life really left an impression on me, much greater than I actually even anticipated it did at the time. But it really sort of left me with the understanding of what adoption can offer a child, even though adoption is absolutely grounded in loss and grief and starts in that place. The opportunity that can be afforded on the other side of that is also very important to acknowledge as well. And so that always sort of was important to me, because I grew up in such a rural area where opportunities were really small. There weren't a lot of choices back then of what you could grow up to be. And so I think that was sort of the connective tissue, if you will, of sort of why I saw opportunity as such an important piece to what my life was going to look like. And so that was something that when I moved to New York to pursue a career there, I had always wanted to move to New York. Everyone asked me, why New York? It was because when I was a kid, I was growing up watching Seinfeld and Friends and all of these shows that were based in New York City.
Absolutely.
And it just looked great. So I thought, why not? I should go there too. So my career was really my priority, as was my husband's, who I met shortly after landing in New York. We were both very career oriented. And for me, I couldn't see how kids would fit into our lives. And that sort of felt like a really hard math problem to solve, of like, how do you sort of split yourself if you're very passionate about your career? And I hadn't always felt the need to have biological children. So I was sort of left with, maybe my career is my thing. And eventually we moved to Austin, Texas, and the pace is just a little slower and the demands are a little lower. And slowly sort of we started to see that there was room for a child, not without support and resources, don't get me wrong, but I think that it sort of became more available to me to be able to do that. And so when I was sort of talking to my husband about like, what does this look like? We landed on, we're not going to have biological children. And a lot of families go through that trial of wanting to have biological children and then deferring to having to adopt from wherever, whether it be private or through the system. But that wasn't something that we addressed. I was just thinking, oftentimes people would ask me if like, oh, why didn't you want to have your own children? And it was just because I didn't. It's sort of one of those things that a lot of people grow up with, this expectation that surely you want to have your own children. And I just didn't. And that was something my husband was supportive of as well. So that was the path that we took. And when we took the orientation, just to learn more about like the very sort of most high level information as it related to the foster care system and becoming foster parents, it just struck a chord with us. I can't explain what it was, but we just looked at each other and were like, this is it. This is the path we want to take. And so that's sort of how we got into foster care.
Well, and it's a very interesting story, considering you're right. When people normally, or the stories you typically hear are parents who, for whatever reason, are unable to have children, and they make the decision to adopt. And so it is different to think about making the conscious decision that biological children is not really what drives me, but there is this need that needs to be filled, and making that decision with your husband. And it wasn't just one foster child, or hasn't been just one foster child though, right? Like there've been a plenty.
Yes. Our current placement is our 10th child that has been in our home. We take one child at a time.
Okay.
We don't take sibling sets because the way that we sort of organize that in our mind is we don't know how much a child is going to need from us, and we still have very active careers that we're still very much committed to. And so with one child, we're able to understand what they need, get the resources around them, pour into everything that they need for the time that they're with us. Whereas if it's with more children, that's something where we just don't want to underserve them.
Sure.
So, yeah.
That's, I mean, when you think about it in those terms, I think that's part of maybe what's driven some of the products or the way you've built for the Cubs, right? Because Percy is there, but there are other products there that are designed for being able to help children develop and parents with those children, right? Like what other types of things did you think were ideal to make your own version of so that people could have access to something that was going to be useful for their children?
Yeah, so one of the ways that I sort of approached it, everything is with intention for the Cubs. So I wanted whether it be a customer, someone who supports the brand, kiddos who benefit from the donations we make to our nonprofit organization, I wanted to focus on celebrating the beauty of belonging. That is something that every human looks for in life. And oftentimes that starts at home. It starts with the most simple things, which are eating, sleeping, and soothing. So it's feeling safe in your home. It's having food to eat and learning that food is safe. It's getting good rest. And parents are biological parents are often given their baby and then said, good luck. And so for me, I wanted to be able to sort of create these very simple categories that parents know they absolutely have to, their child has to sleep, their child needs to be calm, and their child needs to eat. And so focusing on those areas really sort of ladders up to that idea of celebrating the beauty of belonging, because it starts in the childhood home and hopefully is nurtured as we grow.
And it looks like things are extremely intentional. As an example, they're really, they're nice earth tones, things that are in the pastel color palette. But there's not a lot of, as an example, bright, vibrant colors. Was that intentional as well with the products?
Very much so. I am someone who has late-stage diagnosed ADHD. And I don't respond, my eyes hurt when I look at very bright primary colors. My entire home is designed with soft muted colors. And I realized that was for my own calm. And with every kid that has come into our home, I've noticed that there is a difference in their level of calm when they're in this environment, because everything is very soft, very muted, and focused on that. And I understand that not every home is like that, and that's totally fine. But oftentimes, kiddos need that sort of decompression of home. There's lots of places where primary colors are used, and it's totally fine if you prefer those things. That's awesome.
Yeah.
But if you personally respond well as a parent to those colors, and that gives you some peace and some calm, one of the things that I've learned through foster care is co-regulation with the child is absolutely critical for them staying regulated. So if your child is losing it and having a really tough time with something, if you can't regulate with them, it's going to take them a lot longer to regulate back to center.
I see.
And it sounds really silly that just color choices could help with that, but I know firsthand that an environment and how you feel makes a really big difference. And for me, that was things that are soft, muted colors that are easy to look at.
Well, that's actually right up my alley. As an optometrist, we talk a lot about vision and perception. And visual input is really important for developing children in particular. And so while children can see a variety of colors, to your point, they are also tied to the way we feel and the emotions that we have, and being able to relax and see color and use color as a way of being able to bridge and relax a child is actually a phenomenal thing. And so it's fantastic that you've really thought about it that way.
I try.
Now, you talked a little bit about your career, and I have kind of looked at a few things about you just because I thought they were fascinating. Like you've worked in a nonprofit as chief marketing officer, but you've also been involved in other types of companies like Spotify. Can you talk a little bit about your career journey and what got you through those other things that you were doing to get to focus here on working with for the Cubs?
Yeah, I think my career, I've spoken to people and they call it eclectic. Because oftentimes marketers will choose an industry and be amazing in that. And that affords them a really beautiful career in that given industry. I've bopped around to multitudes of industries, none of which have any relationship to each other. And a big reason I think that I've gravitated towards those different roles was because there was a problem to solve. It wasn't necessarily about the industry specifically. It was more about like, what am I going to be able to help this business accomplish and solve through marketing and communications? And so I think that was the thing I was always looking for. I love building things. I love a challenge. I love problem solving and critical thinking. And I'm not good in big organizations that are super slow and structured.
Oh, yeah.
And so I've always gravitated towards the roles that allow me to do all of those things in a way that affords speed and efficiency. So a lot of those decisions were really planted in, I didn't actually realize it until I took a look back, but truly it was really oriented around solving problems and something that was really interesting and meaty that I could dig into.
Well, and sometimes you run into some parallels, maybe that you don't realize at the time, but kind of looking back, you can see some of those things. And as I was looking at some of the companies that you'd worked with, the Charity Water seems to be an organization that they were devoted to helping or finding a need and then solving for that need, not just short term, but maybe longer term. I feel like there's some parallels between that and where you are now with For the Cubs, not in the same capacity, but some of the thoughts and missions between the two.
Absolutely. I think the work that Charity Water did and does is something that is so big and so ambitious. It really made me uncomfortable because it was a big problem to solve. And I learned that I like being uncomfortable. And there's nothing like starting your own business to be super uncomfortable every single day of the week. So I think that idea of like, there's a problem to solve, but it also affects millions of people that I'll never meet.
Oh, yeah.
That was something that felt so big and important and something that I at least wanted to contribute what I could in the time that I was in that organization. And it's a truly wonderful organization and I learned a lot there. And I think it's also allowed me to sort of put a different lens on how to approach giving back, because the challenges that often nonprofits face, there's a lot of rules, there's a lot of expectations and requirements that they have to abide by that just put a lot of constraint around it. Now, Charity Water did a beautiful job of challenging a lot of those, but there are still just very concrete rules of the road that oftentimes nonprofits are forced to follow. And so for me, I wanted to be able to focus on a for-profit business, but figure out a way to be able to give back that felt material and meaningful to the customers so that they could see where their impact was, not that we just cut a check, which don't get me wrong, it's beautiful for organizations, cut a check for nonprofits. We love that. But being able to show customers, these are the children you directly impacted. This is the thing that they were wishing for while they are going through the hardest chapter of their journey so far. And you did that. That was the story I wanted to be able to sort of connect for a customer, because being able to say, oh yeah, like my purchase gave back to a kiddo in foster care is nice. Being able to say, I gave back to Molly and it helped her buy a bed.
Yeah.
That's different.
That's powerful. That's powerful because it really is like almost everything else, right? Like you assume that what you did resulted in something good, but you're never exactly sure what good thing it resulted from it. And so by tying it back and being able to know this is what happened, it's powerful for both the donor, the person writing the check, but it's also powerful because you actually get the life that you actually touched, and that part is amazing.
Exactly.
Now, with One Simple Wish, did you found that simultaneously with For the Cubs, or was there time in between?
I was aware of that organization for some time. I loved their mission and what they were trying to do for kiddos in foster care. There's a lot of amazing organizations supporting foster care in general. The thing that I guess I loved about One Simple Wish was you can send a message to the kiddo that you're helping. So their advocate is able to relay that back to them when they get their wish granted. You can see all of the tracking of when the wish has been granted, when it has been given to the child, if there is a message back from the child and their advocate. So there's a lot of tracking there, and it's focused on the idea that in a time when kiddos have their entire world turned upside down and they have almost no control over their circumstances, they get to wish really big. And they can think about something that give them hope. And so putting that wish out into the world and then granting it back to them, it feels like that little opportunity to remind them there is an adult in their corner. They may not ever meet them, but they're cheering for them because they granted that wish for them. And for me, this is a way to help many more children than just the one in my home that I'm caring for at that time, because I would love to care for more and more children, but I realize where my limitations end.
Yeah.
And so this is a way to just remind them. And that was the thing. I was like, I never want a child to stop wishing and hoping. So this was a way to be able to facilitate that.
So now that you and your husband have been foster parents, now 10 placements over, what have you learned throughout the process that that would make number 11 even better than number 1 if you were doing it over?
I would say there is no consistency whatsoever in foster care except inconsistency. So that is something that is true to life. Like, that is something that I think the more resilience you can build in life in general. But foster care is sort of that really isolated vacuum of teaching you that there is nothing you can do except show up for the child and be the best that you possibly can. And that's true of life as well, right?
Yeah.
Time is another thing that how would I put it? The first 60 days, everything feels 1,000 times harder than what you think it should be. And there's nothing that can prepare you for it. And I've done it 10 times at this point. Nothing prepares you for it, especially if you don't have kids in your home already that are your own kiddos that are staying permanently. Because you go from the very footloose and fancy-free life that you're living with no structure to a very very regimented, very documented lifestyle that has restrictions of all shapes and sizes.
Oh, that is something that I haven't thought about is the documentation and what the restrictions are because of being in the foster system rather than biological children or even the full adoption. Wow.
Correct. Yeah.
And so learning to deal with that is probably one of those things that takes a lot of time to do. And I would imagine you've got the reins now, but you probably still have to think about it and start over a little bit each time you have a child come in.
Yeah, I would say that the particular case I'm involved with now isn't as heavy documentation as the previous case, which I was having to provide very detailed documentation every week with photos and records and exhaustive amounts of information because that's what the case required.
Wow.
And that was a part-time job, like truly like taking a large amount of time from my week. And my husband is a professional musician. So for a large amount of that case, he was traveling. And so I was solo parenting as well.
Oh, wow.
Which was super fun. Single parents, I have no words in terms of how inspired and in awe of you I am. Like single parenting is really hard. And so going through the difficulty of adjusting to, and this was an infant, so they were very high demand to begin with. Doing it alone, running a business and providing the level of documentation that case required, it was structure all day long. It was rigor all day long.
Wow.
And that's really the only way I can describe it. So I think the more that I got used to it was just understanding the scope of it.
Mm-hmm.
It was, yes, it was demanding, but it was understanding like the level of detail. And once I knew that, I could build that in. And the biggest lesson I learned is you need more resources around you, because if you have another case like that takes you away from your career and your business at a moment's notice, you need someone else to step in. It can't just drop.
Right.
And so those are some of the like learnings, especially when it comes to building a business, was really like focusing on like, you cannot do this on your own. I know you would like to think so, but like you cannot. And especially if you want to balance foster parenting and building a business, you're going to need resources. And so with this case, I have built those resources. While it's not as high demand, it does allow me to focus more on the kiddo I'm caring for and not have to worry about those aspects that I was looking after on my own before.
And is that the advice you would give someone who is thinking about foster parenting? Would you suggest that they start to build that resource base as part of the process, or how would you recommend people approach it if they're really thinking about it?
I think the biggest thing I would recommend is getting resources, and not just like, oftentimes child placing agencies will require you to have a babysitter, like an emergency babysitter. And you like, in my head, I was like, oh, we're not going to need a babysitter. We need a babysitter all the time. Having those people lined up because stuff happens.
Right.
Or you just need a break. Like it is a very high stress, very intense experience to be a foster parent. Foster parenting is hard. I'm not going to discount that. It is not easy, but it is also the most rewarding thing that I've ever done in my life. And whenever the day comes that we close our home and we're no longer foster parents, it will be the most important thing that I've ever done in my life. And so it's one of those things that you sort of wrestle with, of like how long you're going to do it. But I think having the resources in place allows you to do it longer and serve more children. And I think the other thing I would underscore for people thinking about becoming foster parents is you are not a legal party to the case. You do not have a voice in the case. You spend every single day with them, but you do not have a voice. So brace yourself for not having that, because when I first got into it, I was like, but surely they would want to understand what is happening in the day-to-day, that I'm spending so many hours with them and how they're responding to visits and how they're coping with X, Y, and Z. Nah, there are professionals that have jobs that are doing that. And some of them will often entertain your feedback and other times they won't. But really letting go of having a voice in the case of the child that you're caring for while they're in the system, that was a really big learning curve.
And that you say that makes absolute sense. It is not something that most people will think about, at least initially, right? Because you've taken this human being into your home and you're caring for them, and you at that point know more about them and their day to day than anybody else does. So to think that you can't have input on those types of things is got to be something you have to prepare yourself for.
Yeah. And I think the other piece is that there are some team members that will absolutely take your feedback on and have a really healthy, hearty discussion about circumstances and ask for your opinion. But it's accepting that there's others that just won't. I think that's the hard part. But the thing that I will say is, like, even though you don't have a voice because you're not a legal party to the case, you will still say what is on your mind, because you're willing to run through a wall for the child you're caring for, because whatever the court decides and whatever the outcome of the case, you have to leave knowing you did everything you could. So it's not to encourage people to stay silent. It's encouraging people to understand that every case is going to be different and dynamics will be different, and your voice, the weight of your voice will be different, and accepting that is going to be the hard part.
So I have to know, what's next for you? If you think about where you are with the company, when you think about what is going on at home, like, what are your thoughts on where you're going to go next, or what you're going to do next?
I think my hope is that I can continue to grow For the Cubs, to serve more families through For the Cubs, both as my customers and on the other side as through our Give Back program, and serve more kiddos in foster care. In terms of my time in foster care, I don't know. I talk to a lot of families and they often say, don't ever close your home, just take a break. Because then if you decide to come back, you have to be relicensed, and it's a lot of work. So I think it's one of those things where it's like, at the end of this particular case, we'll see. I actually don't know. So, because it could end in any number of ways that could change our path. So we'll see.
Well, I think it is amazing what you're doing, and I think bringing awareness to other people who may even be in the same boat, have maybe decided that biological children are not for them, but haven't decided on whether they want to foster children or think about adoption. I think it's good conversation to have, and there is such a tremendous need. It's almost frightening to think about the need and the fact that there are not enough people who really want to participate and truly help these children. And so I'm truly amazed that A, we got to talk about it, but B, that all the things that you're doing out there to help children.
Thank you so much. I think the foster care in general is very misunderstood. There's a lot of work if I use it as a marketing term, it needs a rebrand desperately because people just don't understand it in the way that when you're on the inside, you do. And so I think that's the big piece, that even if you're not thinking about being a foster parent, is just equipping yourself with understanding of the foster care system and the experience and the role of it. People often talk about how foster care is broken, and I can attest it is. But it starts with people wanting to just understand the system itself, as opposed to saying, oh, it's broken, can't do anything about it. So even if people just educate themselves on the system, the challenges, and tiny ways that they can help, it makes a big difference, because if you have biological children, guaranteed there are kiddos in your child's class that are experiencing foster care right now, and helping your child understand how to be there for that child is going to change their life. So that is a way that you can help kids in foster care without any commitment whatsoever of being in the system. So it's those types of things I would wish for people to be eager to learn more about.
That's an amazing point, because not all of us can do all the things, but all of us can do some of the things, right?
Yeah.
And so being able to participate and be able to help, even if you're not going to be a foster parent, that is a fantastic point, and maybe one that's overlooked by any number of people.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So if people want to find out more about For the Cubs, where should they go? How do they do it?
Yes, so you can find us at forthecubs.com. If you feel like shopping, sharing, all of those good things, we're on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. You'll hear a lot of my musings on TikTok about things I'm navigating with my kiddo in terms of her fun behaviors. Right now, she's picked up screeching, which is apparently a very normal developmental thing for a 4-year-old.
Oh, wow.
Everything apparently is developmentally appropriate. So screeching's super fun. But I think the other thing is if you want to get in contact, you can email Percy at For the Cubs. And questions, comments, thoughts, feedback, anything. I love to hear it. It's my favorite. I'm always down to get in touch.
Most awesome. I will make sure that we put that information into the description, and we'll put the links in there so people can click and make it easy for them. And I really, really appreciate you spending time with me. This is a big deal because you are the first of my interviews that we are keeping the video for. And so
Cool.
2025 is a year of doing something new. And so for me, I've had quite a few audio podcasts. And so I am very excited to introduce video to go along with them. And so it'll be available on all platforms, but we'll start actually having video for YouTube too. So this is kind of exciting. And
Awesome.
and what a subject matter to start off the year.
Awesome. I love it.
But it's been fantastic to meet you, and I'm going to keep track of how things are going. And don't be surprised if I ping you to see how this placement number 10 is going and question whether or not there's a number 11 or not.
Awesome. Please do. Please do.
Thank you so much, Amy.
Cheers.
Have a great day.
Bye.